and I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes to take you through the story of my life, and which is also the story of my studio, Spacon X. It is letting you into my project and experiment, which is a professional experiment, but also a very personal experiment. And let me see if it works. It does. I myself am educated an architect back in 2006 from the Royal College of Architecture in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I worked at various architects firms until 2013, where I co-founded the design and architecture studio Spacon X. Spacon X is a cross-disciplinary creative studio doing architecture and design in all scales. The studio was founded in 2013 by myself and my husband, Svend Jakob Petersen, who is present here today. And today we count 22 employees and a dog also. The best thing about our very weird name must be the many different versions of pronunciation that we get from all sides, delivery companies, etc., as the name is basically impossible to read. We didn't know that when we started it. I can help you out and say if you think of bacon and eggs, it's easier to pronounce it. But it's short for Spatial Conversion and Cross-functionality, which is what we do. And we thought there was a lack for such a name as Spacon. So who are Spacon X and how do we work? We talk today under the title On the Contrary. And it's explained as the interest for people that do things differently, that walks their own direction and challenge existing structures. I can relate to this title a lot, to be contrarian, as this has been a big driver for us from the very beginning. I will try my best to take you through our journey up until today and how we, through this energy, are working creatively in our project processes as in our Spacon family. When starting the company, we agreed to do things our own way, to contrast the backgrounds and working routines that we came from, and to not follow the standard structures in order to seek industry's approval. For the same reason, it came as a big surprise when we last year were honored and won the awards for Emerging Designers of the Year from both Frame and Dezeen. A great surprise, but also, of course, a major honor for us as a small firm. But most important, it made us believe even more in the concept of going our own way and reminded us to keep contrasting. So if I should talk about what is important for us, and if we have a recipe for what we do, we actually do have a recipe, or at least some main ingredients that we believe are essential for who we are, for how we work, and not least for creativity to thrive. Here it's summed up as these 4 main ingredients that are personal investment in everything we do, to bring diversity and cross-disciplinarity, a term that we named dumbfidence, and a practice that we describe as disruptimacy, might not have heard those words before, but I'll try to let you through that. First up is the personal investment. This is Sven, my husband, through soon 23 years. We founded Spacon X together. And this is our family, our 2 children, Maya and Matti, who are both present here today also. And our little dog, Molly, who is not present here today. Sven has a background from scenography and advertising, and I from architecture. We live in the center of Copenhagen in an apartment that I inherited from my grandparents. It's cheap and it's central, but when our second child was on his way, we thought we needed more space. We started looking for more square meters, but we decided to try to redo and rethink the apartment rather than moving for more expensive square meters. This started a process of experimenting with the square meters we had, finding smart solutions for how to use both our square meters as our cubic meters, and how consumption of space and furniture for us had the potentials for a lot more creative thinking than we had ever thought of. We started playing with the square meters we had in creating a home for the 4 of us, with flexible frames, custom-made solutions, digitally produced elements. We played with levels, we played with transparencies, lighting, etc. A lot of test and trying on ourselves, reflecting on our behaviors and needs, and designing for that. The task was to find space for our basic activities. But we ended up in a situation trying to find out what other fun stuff we could add to our square meters. It opened our minds to how many undeveloped potentials we had when considering use of space and the built environment in general. And we realized that this subject was relevant not only to us, but as a global issue. And we saw how our issues resonated and woke interest out through the world in diverse sets of media. It went quite fast, and suddenly it was all over. And our own reflections and realizations also led us to reflect on a bigger scale of urban issues. Even just in our own city of Copenhagen, we read how lack of space is an issue because people are clustering, moving towards the cities. And it also made us reflect on the way we build today. In Denmark, loneliness has become a national disease. People simply live too big, too much alone. We looked at how our cities are being developed also, all copying the same structure of big apartments, 90 to 110 square meters, because that at some point was agreed as the healthy, attractive size. This model fits quite okay for a well-doing double-income family with 1 to 2 kids. But knowing how many different modern types of families and varying needs and income we have in a city, it makes absolutely no sense to develop a city like that. We realized how all planning today is thought from a purely monofunctional approach, having a separate room for each function, leaving a lot of square meters empty over a day. How many hours do most of you sleep? Probably not more than 8 hours on average, meaning that 16 hours of day your bed is empty and not used. And when thinking rather in zones and activities throughout the day, and through multifunctional solutions, it would be possible actually to have the same activities in about 50% of the space. Just like we realized when we were working with our own square meters. And this started our first mission for creating a studio, doing things differently than we were used to, and working with spatial conversion and cross-functionalism. We found that by investing ourselves personally, that we managed to rethink a lot of old habits and perspectives. It made us strong in our belief, in our purpose and our mission as a studio. And with this approach, we continuously seek to always find ways that every project relates to ourselves personally, but also is about the whole world and how to make it better. That was the first ingredient. Are you with me? Second ingredient that came clear to us was that when setting a team for a new Spacon, mixing competences, just like we did, the two of us, would be the way to continue recruiting. Combining the different competences of Sven and mine led to new needed dynamics. I was used to work in the big scale, handling the complexity of big buildings, but also with always very long project processes, and a very distant relation to what finally, after many years, was probably going to be built. Sven, on the other hand, through his background from scenography and advertising, was used to short processes from idea to execution. Building scenographies for fashion designer Henrik Vipsgaard for many years, and art installations, and doing advertising campaigns that were executed short periods after being presented as ideas. And through that, always with immediate audience reaction and feedback after completed projects. And we found that mixing our competences gave us new possibilities, views on each other's as our own processes. And with this mix, we started Spacon, and only a year after, we invited our very dear friend, Malene Witt, to join the company and become a partner of the studio. We were working against all advices, basically, saying that we should never mix business and pleasure or dear relations. We kind of fucked that up already, being a couple. But we found that Malene's, first of all, big likability and very good company, but also her mixed background as being educated an architect, but also having worked in the fashion industries for more than 10 years, working with everything from prints to productions and sales, contributed to the dynamics of our supplementary competences. Malene worked in India at the Studio Mumbai for a quite long period, and she had a lot more hands-on and detailed knowledge than both of us. That strategy of mixing competences and backgrounds have been continued through our hiring process. We are hiring architects, of course, all with very different backgrounds and personalities. But in our cross-disciplinary team, we also have a sculptor, design engineers, and anthropologist, experienced economist, concept developers, and spatial planners. We also found already after some years that teaming up with skilled administrative forces gave us more time to be creative, which was what we needed. We learned it the hard way, but it was good. We learned it time enough. And today, 20% or something of our staff all has a background from economy or strategy or communication. And in general, we found that if you want to go fast, you should go alone. But if you want to go far, you should go together. We call ourselves the Spacon family, and we onboard all new members of the family with our why are we here and what is our vision. We mark the importance of having a cross-disciplinary team where all voices are equally important, and that only through these many voices we can maintain being a progressive studio. Everybody are told that they receive an onboarding manual, and that is what we practice. Because it's through our diversity that we can constantly challenge ourselves and through that get far together. Yes. Third up, I might just take a bit of water. Then you can look at this. Our third ingredient is quite related to the previous two, because one thing is to create a diverse universe or a diverse team, but another thing is to create a working environment where all competences are alive and has room to grow. We all know that making mistakes and asking dumb questions is the way we move forward and invent new agendas. So we found that building the actual work environment around our office culture was a key element to our success and has required just as much as our actual projects. A confident work environment means for us that each employee has the confidence to ask them questions and present dumb ideas. Because sometimes dumb ideas actually turn out to be really great ideas. And because we believe that the fear of making mistakes is one of the most toxic ingredients in a creative work environment. Again, this has been kind of rebelling against especially what I was used to from my working life as an architect, 7 years on some of the bigger architect studios, where I found that a lot of that creative energy that people had before from school, for example, was left when their working routines became limited to sit in front of a computer in a very rigid or formal environment. There was a fear of asking dumb questions and a lack of challenges or mistakes. We found that creating a flat structure, being socially gathered, and making room for trial and error, and not least dumb questions across the disciplines, were very essential for us. Our studio in Copenhagen is a house with a courtyard on all sides. We work indoor, we work outdoor. Our desks are connected into these long tables around with an easy flexibility to sitting together, very tight, or alone, no hierarchies. Every day we prepare on shifts, all of us, and eat a healthy lunch all together at a long table. And in each end of the offices we have presentation platforms and open workshop zones. And to give an example of a dumb idea, this is for a project for Ikea, working with the future of dining in urban context, where a lack of time and space actually forces a lot of people globally to entirely discard cooking and dining in their home. Our task was to work with that, so we investigated how to work with more social ways of dining and got inspired by the easy social gatherings around smoking a cigarette. A good social driver, and nobody stopped smoking because of lack of time or space. Obviously a very stupid idea, but this inspiration and process led into a series of easy dining furniture for Ikea. When we were asked by Ikea's innovation office, Space 10, to redesign their busy, crowded, open office plan, we looked back at the extinct and brutalist old-school office cubicles, which inspire us to create a new type of office plan. The cubicles were deconstructed with flexible frames and panels, creating the possibility for closing up in focus zones while still remaining the important social and inspiring open office feeling, which we are also a big fan of. But we worked with clear divisions between working zones and social scenes, always with a high level of agility and overall identity. And this rather dumb idea that was also new to us resonated throughout the world's media under the subject of innovative office spaces. And to us, a confident work environment is a place where creativity and disruptive thinking thrives, and where no idea basically is stupid enough to not be presented. That is the confidence for us. Last ingredients we have in our pot is what we refer to as disruptimacy. It's probably a new word for most of you. It also took us a while to come up with it, but the reason for it is that most of our clients, which you have up here, they basically hire us to disrupt their current way of thinking, to help pushing their borders and revisit their habits and logics. And that goes for all the different clients and context and scales we work with. One of our biggest client is Ikea, for whom we've been doing over 20 projects over the last 5 or 6 years. This is from one of our latest projects for them, where we were hired as external consultants and collaborators to develop a new city center store in the center of Paris of 7,000 square meters. And we found through all these different collaborations that one thing is pushing borders and disrupting. But in order to turn ideas into actual change, it takes some diplomacy. We found that we need to understand all levels and complexity of every project. We found that as many of these 360-degree processes around a project that we can engage in ourselves, the more we can shape disruptive ideas into actual change. this is also related for me to a fair amount of rebelling against the work patterns, especially I have been used to from the different architecture offices that I worked at. A common process that I was very used to was that we as architects would develop a golden idea, for example, delivered in an architecture competition format. And from that golden moment, where we couldn't get our hands down, we would experience a process of compromises, chopping every link of the value chain into half towards finalization of the projects that we were leaving more and more. And this way ended up with a very diluted version of the original golden idea. And we found that if we, with our humbleness and empathy, could involve ourselves in all levels of a project, that we can actually end up adding to all the links of the value chain, ending up with an even stronger final result than the original golden idea, if we dig ourselves into it and stay tuned all the way through. And for the same reason, we also found that our processes always have to be both in the analog and in the digital development. The digital world has inspired us a lot, and we put a lot of effort into developing ways to develop and present projects throughout the processes. We model everything we do in 3D programs, and through different kinds of web-based game engine software and virtual reality, we are now able to walk through our projects during the process, exchange the spatial experiences with our clients and our collaborators. We send them a QR code, and then we can be on board together. And not least being able to have this eye height and moving presence in the projects before they are actually built. That's a big advantage. Our courtyard at the office is our one-to-one workshop, where we always build prototypes and test and try physically, hands-on. You can go out there if you're bored in front of your computer, or feel like doing something, or maybe it's quite needed in the process of a project. And every time we have a project that's small enough that we ourselves can take the whole execution of a project, we do so, where we are the ones to cast and cut and be present on site. So when it's possible for us to be present in all the details, in our weird solutions, and inventions all the way through, we will be it. And it's through such processes that we also found that we learn the most. We learn what works and what doesn't, the atmosphere at the place, how the materials actually acts, etc. And materials and new use of material are often a starting point in our creative processes. Digitally, we found it quite useful to build up our own, what we call our library, because it's a mix of our library, our archive, but also our laboratory. And here we gather all our knowledge, new materials we found, how do they perform, etc. So when starting a new project, we don't have to start from scratch. And in our material library, our physical material library at our office, we have all the physical samples that we play with in each project, and it's a great combination of being in the 3D world and then standing there hands-on with the actual materials, playing directly with that. And we've always been having a high focus on sustainability and new inventive circular materials. But the newest level to our index is that we started ranking all our materials according to a consideration of the material's effects on the global and local climate as the social implications. It's a process under development, but we made our own ranking system, and that has been part of making it possible to select and at least know which materials is good to go, is good to use, and which to please try to avoid. And this close relation and interest in the material often shows in our initial mood boards for each project, and where our concepts for use of materials can be a starting point for a spatial identity and design. Or this, like this example, is a temporary structure where we source textiles collected from big laundry factories on their way to be disposed. We dyed them in all the textiles in avocado and cabbage and experimented quite a lot. Everyone from the office took part of these experiments, had a lot of fun. And then we gave the textiles a new life and used them first to create the VIP lounge for the Tuborg beer. You all know Tuborg, right? It's a Danish beer. And Tuborg is doing this big VIP lounge at Roskilde Festival in Denmark, and we were hired to do that. So we used those textiles. We also wanted to eliminate the rather pretentious VIP atmosphere that was there. And everything is reusable and circular in this pavilion. Even the installation itself, it was reused recently for this year's Chart Art Fair Festival in the center of Copenhagen, where 3 different physical venues were tied together through the spatial identity of the textiles and the scaffolding. And the spatial identity of a project strengthens the feeling of belonging to a place. When working on bigger scale projects, our social agendas are always present. Our belief that the human potentials are big, and that by creating the right platforms, we can help release these potentials. We have worked with pension funds who are responsible for a very big portion of the expansion of residential Copenhagen right now, suggesting alternative ways of building and consuming residential space in changing urban environments. Opening up residential housing to fit a diversity of ways to live through a different perception of space. Oh, can I go back one day? And together with the pension fund, starting the dialogue in the media about how our fast-growing city should be to live in a decade from now. Or as for a new type of community living with housing for students, elderly, and new families, where the ratio between compact private space and extensive shared spaces was the recipe of creating a strong platform for social interaction. For that same client, we are now developing a new type of eco-village in a forest area outside of Copenhagen. This is our biggest project in scale so far, and the project that requires the most diplomacy to realize, as it is developed on a not allowed plot. Our client's brief for us is to make what seems impossible possible. With a strong social agenda, For this project, we're working on all scales. From rebranding the surrounding city, redefining its potential, the political plans for the area, as with a close relation on how we ourselves could dream to live if we should start all over. This is an example of pushing the borders, disrupting in a lot of levels, while keeping the diplomacy in order to make things happen. We'll see how it goes, because this is our latest, newest project. But what we found is that in order to adapt to a world in constant change, it is important to disrupt logics and habits. But in order to make disruptive ideas powerful, we need to knit them together with our logics and habits as well. And these processes we only find possible if all of these ingredients are in the bowl. And these are important pillars in our studio and operation today. Maybe next time we'll meet, we have new or other ingredients. But as for today, that's the soup of Spacon X. Thank you all very much for your interest. Time's up.